realized I was working 15 hours a day, 7 days a week, and realized I wanted to start a family. And, working that hard and having kids was not really compatible. I never had female role models. I never knew that men and women feel imposter syndrome. Every single solitary person feels this way, but nobody talks about it. And it really held me back for a good portion of my career. And so I think if you are showing up at work every day and feeling like you can't be yourself, and feeling like you have to put on a mask, and feeling like you have to be different, and you're afraid all the time, this just may not be the culture for you. And if you go out and you find a company where the culture does match you and you can be your authentic self, I think that a lot of those fears go away.
There are a lot of people who feel like this is just how it'll be forever, right? And it doesn't matter what company or what environment they find themselves in, they're just always going to feel that way. But to your point, if you find the right culture that enables you to feel safe and that you can be vulnerable in, it will create a different environment for you.
And so I think people have to choose whether they value, the career path up to a C-level, or they value a 9-to-5 job with lots of flexibility and, lots of time for hobbies and other things that they love to do. And, it's the people that agitate for money, the people that agitate for title, the people that jump from job to job to chase that money and the title. Those are absolutely not the people that are going to be successful. And I have spoken to enough very senior people who have jumped to companies for title and for team size and for all the other things, and they're miserable, that I can say with 100% certainty that those things are not valuable.
Welcome to the She's So Sweet podcast, where we interview accomplished women who have worked their way to the C-suite. I'm your host, Chrissy Falteruso, Chief Customer Officer and award-winning customer success executive. I am so thrilled today to introduce our guest, Jessica Gilmartin, CRO at Calendly. Hi, Jessica. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Christy. Nice to be here.
We're thrilled to have you. But before we get into all the good stuff, I would love if we could start by telling the listeners a little bit about yourself. So if you could share an overview of Calendly and what your current role as CRO entails.
Sure. So I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Calendly. I run marketing and sales. If you're not familiar with Calendly, it's the world's largest scheduling automation platform. So we help everyone from solopreneurs to very large enterprises make scheduling much, much easier.
And so now the CRO role for you, this is a newer role, right?
Yes, 1 month in.
And how's it going so far?
It is great. It's so funny. I was a little bit nervous about taking on sales because I had joined a CMO last year. And it was a little daunting to take on two completely different functions. But I have to say that the more that I have done it, the more that I realize that every sales and marketing team should actually be one, because it just removes all the barriers, all the, sort of the conversations about leads and opportunities, just all of the different issues that sales and marketing teams have in terms of conflict around priorities. And so it's actually been really, really wonderful.
That's great. And how are the teams feeling about this? Everyone feels good about the change?
They love it. And we've had so many salespeople now come into our marketing team meeting and talk about their day-to-day, what leads are valuable, what leads aren't, what customers respond to. And the whole time I'm like, how did I not do this before? So I feel really bad about myself for not having brought salespeople in before, but just the bringing the teams together and having them all feel like one team has just been absolutely amazing. So the teams are so excited about it.
That's awesome. And so what's interesting though, is like you talk about this kind of like a no-brainer, bringing these teams together. Interestingly, I'm obviously on the customer success side, and we're seeing a lot of transition of customer success teams under the CRO. What are your thoughts on having a CRO who kind of manages marketing, sales, and success?
It totally makes a lot of sense. We are very fortunate to have an absolutely amazing chief customer officer. So I would never want to take customer service because he's so wonderful and does it much better than I would ever do it. But I could see a world where it makes a lot of sense. And I think one thing that's been really interesting at Calendly, when I joined, one thing that we focused on is that post-sales experience. And what's interesting is very, very few marketing teams actually think about the post-customer experience, which is crazy because that's the most important part. Right? The most important part is when you make that sale is making sure that that customer is happy, they stay a customer, they expand with you, they understand the value of the product that you purchased. And nobody can do that better than marketing. And so I'm really proud of my team because we do spend so much time on that post-sales experience. And so it's really important to have either all of it under one roof or have a really fantastic relationship between the pre-sales teams and the post-sales teams.
I love that. And I do think it makes a ton of sense. It's interesting to see how so many organizations are evolving. Now listen, obviously, I don't always say obviously, right? Because maybe it's not obvious, but I know that when I was a young girl, I didn't dream of being a chief customer officer. So I don't know if that was your case, if you grew up and you're like, you know what, one day I'm going to be CRO and like, this is my passion. But if that wasn't the case, what did you have aspirations for when you were growing up?
I can promise you, I did not know what a CRO was or a CRO. I didn't know what marketers were. I didn't know what sales was. So yes, this was definitely a long and winding road to this point. So I grew up in a very traditional middle-class Jewish household in New York. And my parents were both civil servants. And honestly, the only things that I knew, literally the only professions I knew existed were like doctor, dentist, lawyer, teacher. And so I knew I wasn't going to be a doctor or dentist because I don't like science. And my mother was a teacher, and I thought that's a pretty hard job. So I thought, okay, I'm going to be a lawyer. So that was in my mind. And so I went to Cornell's Industrial and Labor Relations School, which is the number one feeder school into law school. And so I took my first pre-law class, and I realized I do not like the law at all. It was not for me. And so I had to take a pretty hard pivot my freshman year and figure out what else could I do that was not law. So that's how I stumbled into this profession.
That's so interesting. So one, I just have to comment. My daughter is actually starting to look at colleges, and she's obsessed with Cornell. Like that's her top school right now. So I'm like in awe of everyone who went there because I'm like, she wants to go so bad. But that's so awesome. So I got to ask, when you thought you'd be a lawyer, what kind of law did you think you'd practice?
I did not get that far. I just knew that there was a thing called law. And I guess I figured corporate law. That seemed like a thing that was, maybe on TV. LA law was kind of big in that time. So yeah, it was not a well thought out plan.
And so then you pivoted. What did you end up going to school for then?
So I had to stay in the labor relations school because of complicated transfer rules. And so literally I said, okay, what are it's very funny. This is really not the way anybody should plan a career, but it worked out for me. But I said, I had to still major in labor relations, knowing that was not what I wanted to do. And so I had to find a career that didn't require any kind of specific, degree. And so I looked around and I said, consulting, trading, and investment banking were three good careers that a lot of people left Cornell doing. And I didn't want to do consulting because I didn't want to travel all the time. I spent some time looking at trading and realized, and I actually spent a day on the trading floor and was like, oh, I am not cut out to be a trader. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to be an investment banker. So that was how I settled on being an investment banker. And then I was very laser focused then on finding internships in Wall Street so that it really set me up to be successful and to be able to get my first job in investment banking.
That's awesome. And so when did you pivot out of that?
So I spent 4 years as a banker, and it was a great time. I was promoted after 2 years. I actually got to move to London and spend 2 years there. And it was really one of the best experiences that I think anybody could have as an early stage career professional, because it teaches you a lot of really fantastic skills that I've kept with me for my whole life. But what I realized after a few years was that, I was advising a lot of companies. I was working with a lot of companies, but I didn't really get to understand the inner workings of a business. And I thought that there was so much more that I could give and so much more that I was interested in understanding. But investment banking by definition is just project-based. So you kind of jump from company to company. And I was realizing I wanted to spend more time with the executives. I wanted to learn more about the business. And so, I didn't really know what that would look like. And so I figured, let me go to business school so I could, get that foundation and also take a little bit of time to learn from my peers and understand what other options in business there were. Because at that point, I still didn't really understand much else besides finance.
So interesting. So now as you reflect back on your career journey, what would you say were some of the pivotal moments or decisions that contributed to your ascent to the C-suite?
So I think obviously going to business school was really critical for me. It doesn't make sense for everybody, but for someone that wants to switch careers, it makes a lot of sense. And so it was incredibly valuable for me to go to business school. I took my first marketing class, fell in love with it, and I went to Wharton, which is very data driven. And so the marketing classes there were fantastic for me because it was this perfect mix of creativity and analysis, which I think is kind of exactly who I am. And so that was really valuable for me. And then finding my first marketing internship, and then moving to Austin and getting a job in marketing there. So all these things were really valuable for me. And then moving to the Bay Area, starting my own business, was incredibly valuable for me. Being an entrepreneur kind of changed my whole career trajectory. It also changed my whole perspective on what it's like to run a business and be in business. And I kind of have that entrepreneurial spirit with me, regardless of where I've ended up.
What kind of business did you start?
I started a chain of yogurt stores.
Oh, so okay. So then you're doing this. When did you pivot again?
I know.
And almost like, why? I was like, I want to stay with the yogurt.
I always tell everybody my background is the weirdest background. Nobody in the world has as weird a background as I do. So I was working at Dell. My husband got a job out in the Bay Area, and so we moved out here. And I called a good friend of mine who I went to business school with, and I said, "Hey, I'm moving out to the Bay Area." She had just moved out here, and she said, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting a business. Do you want to start one with me?" And I was young and stupid and didn't realize how hard it was to start a business. So I said, "Sure." And we just started throwing around ideas of things that we were really passionate about. And one thing we're both really passionate about is healthy food and healthy living. And we sort of said, hey, how can we take our passion, but also balance it with what we believe is an opportunity in the market? And one thing we saw was that we felt like there was a really big opportunity for healthy, fast, casual food. Like if you wanted a treat for yourself, it's like cupcakes and cookies and ice cream. It's all really bad for yourself. And we thought, we were, young, health conscious professional women in their 20s. And we're like, there's got to be this opportunity to help other people like us get really good food. And so we came up with the yogurt concert, and we built a concept. We built the whole thing from scratch. We opened up in Palo Alto. It was a massive success from the moment we opened. It was incredibly fortunate. And we opened up multiple ones. And I did that for a few years, and then realized I was working 15 hours a day, 7 days a week, and realized I wanted to start a family. And working that hard and having kids was not really compatible. And so I was very fortunate. I was able to sell the business, had my first child, thought I was going to stay home for a while, and was like, nope, I am definitely not a stay-at-home mom kind of person. And stumbled my way into tech marketing. And that's kind of how I started.
That's great. I got to ask, are the yogurt stores still open?
They closed during COVID, which was really, really sad.
Bummer.
I started crying. It was a really significant piece of me, and it was really sad when they closed.
Oh, that's so sad. Because it's like you had this big legacy that you'd created, invested so much of yourself into. Oh, man. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. Sadly, COVID had that impact on so many businesses.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Now we've talked about some of the learnings and battle scars that you've had in your journey, but when you're kind of like rising to the top, right? What were some of the significant challenges or obstacles that you faced, and how did you overcome them?
I'd say one of the biggest challenges that I faced is I definitely did not grow up with a learning mindset. I definitely grew up with a very fixed mindset. And if you haven't heard of Carol Dweck's research on learning mindset versus fixed mindset, go out right now and study it, because it's absolutely amazing. Brene Brown is also someone that is very inspirational for me in her work. And so I think one of the biggest challenges I had when I was early in my career is that I had this desperate fear of being wrong and not feeling like the smartest person in the room. And that really ended up holding me back. And I went through this. I was incredibly fortunate when I was at Google to be selected for this leadership training. And as part of it, they anonymously surveyed my peers and the people that reported to me. And the results were quite different than what I would have expected. And I was showing up at work in a very different way than I thought I was showing up, and very inauthentic to me. Like I just was not showing up the way that I believed that I was inherently. And so I went on a really big sort of soul searching journey. I talked to everybody that I worked with and realized that this fixed mindset, this fear of being wrong, this fear of people not believing that I was the smartest person in the room was actually totally holding me back. And I totally changed. Like literally overnight, I just became a different person. And I believe that was the moment that changed my career. That was the moment that changed the trajectory of my life. And I'm still so incredibly grateful for that moment.
That's so crazy. I mean, it's to also be able to like hit a switch and pivot the way that you did is incredible, because I think a lot of folks struggle with that, right? Like it's almost like they've created their identity professionally and that's who they are. And they kind of stick with that, right? So even if they're getting feedback, they're not open to making that change, right? Or they're kind of like a little resistant. So I think it's so wonderful for you that not only were you able to make the change, but how it contributed to your growth over time.
I mean, the good thing about it was that I had been pretty unhappy before because I felt like I had to be pretty inauthentic at work. My normal self is to be very open and friendly and to be very vulnerable. And then I was showing up in a very different way at work. And so when you have that dichotomy between who you actually are and who you're showing up at work, you can't possibly be happy. And so when I sort of said, hey, I'm just going to be myself, that was really liberating and really freeing. And I was really happy and I was much happier. And so I realized that this was the right thing for me. I think one other thing that I realized as part of it was I had always looked at other people and said, gosh, if I only acted like them, right? And so I'd look at other managers, I'd look at other leaders, I'd look at speakers and say, I need to be like them and speak like them and act like them and manage like them. And once I said, you know what, I'm just going to sort of take inspiration from them, but I'm going to be myself and I'm going to be my own person. Again, that was just a massive, massive step function for me because I came across as authentic because I was being myself. And so that was really game changing for me.
It's so fantastic to hear that because, there's so many professionals at all different levels that really struggle with imposter syndrome and are trying to feel like, do I fit in? And they're questioning themselves and they are comparing, right? All the time. And, it's funny because the more women I talk to, especially with this new platform, I find that definitely women, especially in these leadership roles, still struggle with that today. But it's been an interesting journey for all of them. And how do you kind of pivot? And then all of a sudden one day they do realize that they are enough, that they have value. And when they start to just, to your point, show up as themselves, it changes the entire trajectory of their professional careers.
Yeah, I actually have made it a mission to talk about imposter syndrome. I've done it at Asana. I did it at Calendly. I literally the first thing I do is I reach out to the women group and I say, hey, can I speak about imposter syndrome because it's something I'm so passionate about. I never had female role models. I never knew that men and women feel imposter syndrome. Every single solitary person feels this way, but nobody talks about it. And it really held me back for a good portion of my career. One of the reasons, honestly, was in investment banking, it was all men. It was a very, very difficult environment. It was very rare that I attended a meeting where I wasn't literally yelled at, screamed at, cursed at. And so I had this feeling, people knew that if they wanted to find me, I was probably crying in the bathroom somewhere because it was just such a brutal experience. It was terrible. And that really scarred me for most of my career. And it took me a good 15 years before I realized that, every time that I was going to speak at, in front of people or going to present to, my CEO or to any leaders, I would almost have a panic attack. And it was because of this experience of when I was younger and having those negative connotations and those experiences. And then once I finally realized, you know what, no one's yelling at me and I am successful and I am doing well and I am being praised and I am getting what I want. It took me years to realize I needed to unlearn those habits. And that was actually when I stopped having imposter syndrome and started realizing, you know what, I am actually competent. And if I am in a situation where I don't get my way or I do something wrong or say something wrong, it's not the end of the world. I'm not going to get fired. People, all the good work I've done is not going to be undone by one dumb thing that I say in a meeting.
You're so right. And I think it's that fear that holds so many people back. It's the unknown of what will happen if they act a certain way or if they show up a different way. And so they're just so scared of just being vulnerable and putting themselves out there that way.
And I think one of the important things too that I've learned over time is that different companies have different cultures. And so if you, and I haven't necessarily fit in every company I've been at. And so I think if you are showing up at work every day and feeling like you can't be yourself and feeling like you have to put on a mask and feeling like you have to be different and you're afraid all the time, this just may not be the culture for you. And if you go out and you find a company where the culture does match you and you can be your authentic self, I think that a lot of those fears go away.
I think it's so spot on because I think that there are a lot of people who feel like this is just how it'll be forever, right? And it doesn't matter what company or what environment they find themselves in, they're just always going to feel that way. But to your point, if you find the right culture that enables you to feel safe and that you can be vulnerable in, it will create a different environment for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I know that you've been speaking with a lot of your team and obviously other employees, and you said you go speak with the women's groups about this imposter syndrome. How do you feel like that has impacted the women around you?
So I get a lot of people just saying how grateful they are that I'm willing to talk about it because, it is something that I think women and men suffer from. I think it is definitely not only about women. And I think, I work with a lot of men. I've always worked with a lot of men. And I think men have a even harder time sharing that they have this. And so I think for everybody, they're really grateful that there are people that they look up to that have, reached a C level that are willing to talk about this. And I think one of the things that I also have noticed is that people think that a lot of these skills are inherent. So I was speaking at a recent kickoff and I was presenting a lot, and all these people came up to me and said, "Gosh, you're just a natural presenter." And I was like, "I can tell you there is nothing natural about anything that I have done." It is 20 years of feedback and presentation coaches and prepping and learning and failing. And I tell everybody that. And they just, they're so grateful to hear it because they can see themselves being able to do this. Whereas before I think a lot of them just assume that you either are good at something and you're not. And that I think was one of the greatest things about having this, learning mindset instead of fixed mindset is that it's not true. I mean, like I will never be great at sports. I'm short. It's not going to happen. So like that, I will accept I'm not going to be good at. But when it comes to business skills, like there's, you can learn everything. And it's just a matter of being really open to feedback, of just practicing, of getting lots of people, that are willing to help you, to give you the really tough feedback, to practice on, to learn with. It's about, looking at other people that you admire and seeing how they do things and asking them how they do it. So everything is learned. Everything can be learned. It's just a matter of whether you're willing to do it and take some really hard feedback.
I love that. And I think it is so critical, not only for folks to receive it, but if you're in a position to provide feedback to folks, and you don't need to be a leader to provide feedback, create a safe environment and just share that, because we can all learn to be better, to your point, right? These things can be learned.
Yeah, I'm pretty obsessed with feedback. My team, I'm sure some are going to listen to it and they'll be like, yeah, no, she really is obsessed with feedback. And I've brought in like third-party trainers to come in multiple times to teach all the team about how to give and receive feedback. Because I don't believe that you can be a successful organization without constantly learning and without soliciting and giving feedback in real time in the moment. And so that's the number one thing for me that I tell my team is that this is all about giving feedback directly to the person so that we can all become better. To me, it is the number one driver of success versus not in an organization.
Well, it makes a ton of sense why you've seen so much success in the organizations that you've been a part of. Now, speaking of success, we never spend enough time reflecting on it. I don't know, well, maybe you do. I don't. I know that I always am like quick to remember my failures or moments where I'm like, oh God, what did I do? What did I say? But I think it's important for us to like take a step back and reflect, because we've all done so many wonderful things. So when you look back at your career, what would you say are the moments that you're most proud of?
Well, so this is a little bit unusual. So this is kind of before my career, but I would say one of the things that really changed my perspective and my willingness to take risks and my belief in myself was my junior year of college. I decided to sort of fulfill my lifelong dream and go to France and live in Paris for a semester. And I did it completely on my own. I didn't do it through my school's program. And so I just remember being on that plane by myself, going to this strange country, not knowing anybody and feeling this incredible fear, but also excitement. And it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. And I remember every time that I doubted myself and every time I worried about taking that risk and that leap, I thought about that moment. I thought about the fact that I got on that plane, even though I was afraid, and it turned out really well and I believed in myself. And so I think every great moment that I've had and every leap I've had has been this moment of intense fear, but believing in myself that I could do it and figure it out. So that was that first moment, moving to London with Lehman Brothers as an investment banker. That was another moment of getting on the plane and actually met my husband there. So that was a really, really great experience for me, in addition to being a great professional experience. Starting, my yogurt business was beyond scary. I put my entire life savings into it. And, taking the first leap to becoming, a COO of a startup after never even contemplating that I could do that, and learning on the job and figuring that out. So all these moments where I had intense doubts and fears, but doing it anyway, I think that's to me is something that I've sort of taken with me my entire career.
It's so amazing that all of your proudest and most successful moments are tied to something that's terrifying. Because I feel like that's a blocker for so many people, right? So many people don't take the leaps that they need to or should because of that fear. And you didn't let that stop you at any point in your journey. That's so wild and something you should be so proud of.
Yeah, and plenty of things didn't go right. I mean, I was at a few startups that didn't work. And, that stunk. Nobody wants to be the startup that doesn't work. But I learned something from every single one of those opportunities. And every one of those opportunities set me up for something different and new. And so I don't regret it. And I'm glad I did it. And the reality is that not every risk is going to pay off. And as long as you learn from it, and as long as you take a calculated, educated risk, and as long as you recognize, hey, when things aren't working, and you move on at the right time, like, why not take a risk? We only have a certain number of years to live on this earth. Who wants to play it safe?
I love that. That's such great advice. The She's So Sweet podcast is brought to you by Client Success. Client Success is an all-in-one customer success platform to help post-sale implementation and success teams manage customers from new to renew. Through an industry-leading platform approach, Client Success gives businesses an in-depth view into customer health, product usage trends, along with churn and risk data so that your team can not only retain customers, but help them grow as well. Whether it's managing customer onboarding workflows in shared portals, building custom health scores, tracking sentiment with NPS surveys, or doing more with less through AI and automations, Client Success gives customer success professionals a true one-stop platform to manage all aspects of the customer journey. To learn more about the industry's fastest to implement customer success platform, visit www.clientsuccess.com. That's Client Success. Simple, powerful customer success. Now, we already talked about how you're helping your teams, right, male, female. But one of the things that I really love, and again, why I started this podcast, is that I've always been inspired by the saying, empowered women empower women. And just like you, right, I didn't see enough successful women growing up professionally in my career. And so it's always inspiring to connect with folks like yourself who are just doing wonderful work. What are some of the ways that you feel like you're empowering other women as they're taking on leadership opportunities?
So, I'm the executive sponsor of the Women at Calendly group, which is a great opportunity to bring women together and to share professional advice and to provide just emotional support as well as we sort of go through this journey together. I think that's really important. I also do lots of mentoring. I get reached out to all the time, which is lovely, from other folks that I've worked with in the past that are thinking about changes in their career. And I think that's really, for me, that means a lot, to be able to support women that have worked for me that are thinking about, new stages of their journey, new opportunities, how to think about it. And also just to give them sort of emotional support as well as they think about, can they do it? Can they take that leap? And so I'm always really supportive of people taking that leap and enabling them to sort of understand that they have that ability.
I think it's so fantastic. Now, obviously, we know that being in the roles that we are in, there is a difficulty balancing work and personal lives. And it's something that I'm sure, just given your success trajectory, right, this is something you've had to balance. Even when you were doing yogurt shops, you talked about stepping back because you wanted to start your family, so making those tough decisions. How do you navigate work-life balance?
Yeah, I mean, I might have a little bit of a controversial take on this. And it's probably because of my own experience. So I think there are times in your life where you lean out and you lean in. And so in my 20s, I leaned very, very heavily in. Obviously, I was an investment banker and had my own, business. I worked 100 plus hours a week. I don't know that I could be where I am without having done all of that work. And so what I think is, and then when I had my young kids, I definitely leaned out. I still was working hard, but I had my nanny from 8 to 6, and those were my working hours. And, at 6:01, I was a full-time mom, and that was it. And I couldn't do anything else. And so now my kids are a little bit older. I work from home. We have a completely virtual environment. And so I definitely work more hours, and but it's flexible, right? So I may take off at 3:00 one day to go to my kid's baseball game, but then I'll jump back on at 7:00 and do some work. And so I think the idea that you can have a really successful career while having a 9 to 5 job is probably not the most, is not the most realistic. And so I think people have to choose whether they value, the career path up to a C level, or they value a 9 to 5 job with lots of flexibility and, lots of time for hobbies and other things that they love to do. Neither one is wrong. Both of them are totally acceptable. And I think it's just you deciding what are your priorities. I am just someone that loves to work hard. It's something that is just a very important part of my identity. And I've never minded putting in the hours. But other people absolutely think that's crazy. And that is totally fine. It's just hard to balance both of them.
No, I agree. And I think that's such an important point, because I do hear a lot of, even with my daughter growing up, and I hear her friends, and there is this real hyper focus on living life, right? And creating balance. But to your point, that's okay. And yes, you can live a balanced life, but your priorities are different then, right? Similar to you, I worked really hard very early in my career because I always thought I'll make all these investments now and it'll pay off when in my 40s and my 50s, right? I can figure out what retirement will look like, but I'm willing to do the work now because I wanted to be so successful in my career, whatever that career was. But I do think that if you do want to get to a certain point, you've got to put in the time, you've got to put in the work.
Yeah, my other the other executives and I talk about this all the time. When we go on vacation, we're still working, and that's okay for me. I don't mind it. Other people mind it a lot, but I can't have this large team that's dependent on me. I literally have to sign off on things. I have to sign, sales contracts. I have to unblock people, and I can't just take off a week. And so that's totally fine for me. I don't mind it. I don't mind spending a few hours every day working. Other people mind it a lot, but then you probably shouldn't have a job where a lot of people are relying on you. And again, it's totally fine. There's no judgment about whether this is the right path for you or not. But I think it's just really important for people to know themselves and to understand where they want to lean out or lean in their lives.
Such important feedback. And I think it's a great perspective for us all to have. Now, looking back, right, is there advice that you wish you had received earlier in your career? And what insights would you share with your younger self?
So I would say that I definitely let myself be influenced by other people a little bit too much in terms of my career paths and the jobs that I took. And especially being in Silicon Valley, you get very wrapped up in, the race to the startup that's going to be the next Facebook. And so, to me, at least for quite a while, for a few of the startups that I joined, I didn't necessarily feel the most excited about them, but I joined because they had amazing investors and, great CEO backgrounds, and other people told me that I should do it because that was going to be the road to riches and the road to success, and I was going to be a billionaire and all those things. It was only when I sort of said, you know what, I'm not going to listen to other people. I'm going to listen to myself, and I'm going to do something because I believe in it and because I think I'm going to be happy there. I'm going to learn. I'm going to make an impact. I'm not going to focus on the money. I'm just going to focus on what can I learn and what can I achieve and the people that I work with and what can I do. That was when, actually, ironically, that was when my career took off. And that was when I was so much happier and I did great things is when I listened to myself and not other people. And I focused on the work and not the money and the title and all those other things. Those things are not important.
So that's interesting that you say that, right? Because I do feel I don't know that I've spoken with too many very successful women who at some point in their career weren't hyper fixated on the next step, right? Which came with compensation and a title. And so how would you advise folks that are early in their professional careers who are trying to navigate their way to the top, whatever the top is in whatever profession? How would you advise them when we're advising them to not focus on the title or the compensation, focus on the impact? What advice would you offer them?
One thing that I tell my team all the time, and I believe it so genuinely and fully because I've seen it over and over again, is that if you do great work and you focus on making an impact, the other stuff will come to you. The money and the title and the team and all these other things will come to you because people will recognize it. And, it's the people that agitate for money, the people that agitate for title, the people that jump from job to job to to chase that money and the title, those are absolutely not the people that are going to be successful. And I have spoken to enough very senior people who have jumped to companies for title and for team size and for all the other things, and they're miserable, that I can say with 100% certainty that those things are not valuable. And I've seen it in my own career. When I joined Asana, so I actually took a little bit of a step back. So I was I had been at CMO and COOs of startups for 6 years. And, it was kind of ups and downs and up and down. I said, you know what, I want to go to a larger company, even if it is not in a C-level role, because I feel like this is an important step in my career. And so I joined Asana as sort of a head of revenue marketing. I had a small team. And I said, but you know what, I was a little bit worried about that, but I said, I'm going to take a chance on myself because I believe in the company. I believe in the team. I believe in opportunity. And within 2 years, I had 6x the size of my team. I had 5 or 6 different functions under me. And that totally set me up to get this job at Calendly, which I absolutely would never have gotten before. And so I think that to me, and I never asked for anything at Asana. I never asked for a raise. I never asked for a team, but I just focused on doing really great work and thinking about what were the most important problems to solve at Asana. And I focused on solving them. And people just kept giving me more stuff because they could see that I could take it. I was interested. I wanted to help. I wanted to do the right thing. So I just believe that if you focus on making an impact, and you think about the opportunities, you think about the problems, and you proactively try to solve them, that it will come to you.
Okay. Now, there are a ton of folks out there that are advocating for folks to go in. You want something, you have to be vocal about it, you have to chase it, you have to put yourself out there, you have to tell them what roles you want, how much money you should be earning. So obviously your advice is a little different. Yeah. So what do you see the difference in the approach, right? So obviously you've kind of positioned one way to do this, right? Focus on the impact, and then those rewards will come. And then there you've got this whole kind of community of folks who believe you have to be very clear in kind of advocating for yourself and making sure that everyone knows what you want so you can continue to build.
Yeah. I just think there's a really big difference between advocating for yourself and advocating for the company. So just as somebody that has managed literally hundreds of people, the people that advocate for themselves, I'm just not that excited about helping them because they are looking out for themselves. The people that are advocating for the company, I'm very excited about helping them because I know what they're doing is they're looking out for the best interests of themselves and the company. So if someone came to me and said, hey, I think there's an opportunity to do this better, and I want to do it because I think I have these skills, I am very excited to talk to them because I know that is going to be better for the company and it's going to be better for them. If someone just comes and tells me that they want to be a director because they think they deserve it or because their friend was a director, that's not valuable to me. That's not valuable to the company. So I just think that it's switching that mindset to, what is right for the company and making people understand that they have the skills to do that. That's the difference. I also think there's a difference of, if you are underpaid, know your value. So absolutely, like if you're underpaid, if your manager isn't proactively looking out for you and saying, hey, I think, I'm looking at the comps, that's a different story. And I think everybody should sort of know their value and be comfortable in having those conversations. But just asking for more money and asking for a title because you think you deserve it, I can promise you that is not the way to success.
Jessica, I feel like if nobody listens to any part of this podcast, but like that last 3-minute clip, they would get like their time's worth. It's so amazing. It's great feedback for folks. I don't think that they see it from that perspective, right? Mm-hmm. Advocating for the company versus advocating for themselves.
I'll give you a perfect example. When I joined, someone on my team, a senior person, said, hey, this is the very first conversation. And he said, hey, this is my current role. I can do so much more. And these are the opportunities that I think we have at the company. And this is where I think we can do more. And I was at the company for like a week. And I said, okay, I don't know anything yet, but thank you for telling me that. And then as I was sort of getting into it, and a couple weeks later, I was like, you know what? He's absolutely right. There's this huge opportunity here that we're not taking advantage of. And I said, guess what? You've got this team now. And I gave him that team and I never regretted it. And then he excelled at it. And I've given him more and more. That is the perfect way to sort of, and he's gotten title and money and all these other great things that have come with it. But that's, to me, the perfect way to approach it, which is focused on, what his experience was, why he can add value, and how he can help the company.
Oh, I love a good example. So that's great. So for anyone who's listening, that's the way to get it done. Now, obviously, this is not the end of the line for you because you've already proven that you can do so much. And obviously, you're taking on this new role at Calendly as CRO. But what's next for you? Like, how do you see your career evolving? And what are some of those future goals for you?
So I hope I retire at Calendly. That is definitely my goal. I would love to see it, continue to grow and be successful. And continue to. I love the product. I love the team. It's a wonderful company. There's nothing more fun than being at the airport or being, literally anywhere at a party and telling people that you work at Calendly, and everybody says how much they love it. So that is, as a marketer, there's nothing better. So I hope to be here for a long time. And then I really love to advise other companies. It's something I'm really passionate about. I talk to a lot of other entrepreneurs and CEOs about building their teams. So I'm kind of hoping to sort of transition the last period of my career into more advisory work, more investing, really supporting the next generation of entrepreneurs be successful. It's something that I love to do now on the side and would love to do it full time.
Love that. It's funny because I feel like all of my guests so far have shared similar future plans. So it seems like that's kind of like a path forward from the C-suite is kind of moving into that advisory capacity and whatever that is, right? Being an investor, a VC, doing some of your own consulting. So seems like that is the path.
When you have done this for so many years, at some point you have learned so much and you've made all the mistakes and you're like, you know what, I would love to help other people not make the same mistakes.
Right. And I feel like this also has a shelf life, right? Being in a startup environment, I always say, is like dog years. Mm-hmm. And so you can't just keep doing this forever. I'm like, at some point I will say, this is my last startup. I can't do this anymore. I'm going to figure out what my future looks like.
That is also very true.
All right. So before we wrap up today, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away with them?
I think, a lot of what we talked about, which is believe in yourself, take risks, focus on learning, focus on making an impact, think about what you can do to support your team. And so thinking just, a lot less about yourself and a lot more about the impact that you can make on the company. And I think that will be the key to success.
That's great advice. And thank you so much for your time today, Jessica. Your journey is truly inspiring, and I'm excited to see what the future holds for you.
Thanks very much.
So for everyone, oh, thank you. For everyone, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please feel free to rate and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, subscribe on YouTube, and connect with us on LinkedIn. Thank you again, and we'll see you soon. Hi guys, I want to share a bit about an organization that I support called Wednesday Women. They're on a mission to increase the visibility of executive women leaders that you should know, learn from, and be inspired by. On LinkedIn, they share the profile of 2 amazing women each week, on Wednesdays of course. And now just imagine if we all followed, amplified, and nominated the women that we want to see more of. Their initiative provides examples of women CEOs, founders, sales executives, technical leaders, and so many more. By supporting Wednesday Women, you'll see more of these professionals in your social feeds, of course, but also on stages, podcasts, and panels. If you're interested in learning more and supporting their initiative, head over to www.wednesdaywomen.org or follow them on LinkedIn.